Today, we're working with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association to co-host a webinar to provide information on the state of rooftop solar in Wisconsin. So WFU and MREA members have a lot in common, and we're excited to collaborate on the topic of shared interest. We've organized this webinar at the request of our members participating in the newly formed Energy Committee, who's looking at more how we can support the distributed solar and energy generation. So when we were looking for an educational speaker on this topic, we were excited to open this up to everybody who might also be interested in. If you're interested in getting in touch with the Energy Committee or just becoming a member of the Farmers Union, you can reach out to me. My contact information will be posted in the chat for you to get a hold of me if there's any questions at all. Today, we're joined by Corey Ziemann from MREA. MREA is a membership-based organization that's a nonprofit out of Custer, Wisconsin. Their mission is to promote clean energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable living through education and demonstrations since 1990. In this position, Corey's the solar program coordinator, and he runs the MREA's Grow Solar program, which is a coordinated effort between Midwest organizations and municipalities to build an open and advantageous solar market that provides long-term benefits to communities. Through their solar group buy for homes and business owners and solar toolkits for city, county, and community and electric utility leaders, Grow Solar makes investments in solar faster, easier, and more affordable. Corey is a lifelong Wisconsinite, currently based in Appleton. Prior to joining MREA in 2022, he was a hydroponic farmer at Ernesi Farms in Ripon and served as the dining sustainability coordinator for UW Oshkosh, where he managed the hydroponic growing facility. So it's nice to have a speaker who has some farming experience. Thank you for being here, Corey. And they supplied lettuce for the campus dining at Oshkosh. Corey's degree is in environmental studies, and he grew up in Iola, which is in central Wisconsin. I will turn it over to you, Corey, for more information.
All right, thank you for that introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. So I'm just going to run through our slides, and before I get started, I just want to say if you have questions during the presentation, just throw your hand up. I believe you have to use the react function on the bottom to raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat, and I'll get to those as we go through the presentation. But I did want to start with just introducing MREA and Grow Solar. So as Tara said, the MREA is a member-based nonprofit in Custer, and Grow Solar is an arm of the MREA. So Grow Solar operates group buys throughout the Midwest, in Wisconsin, and in other states. We've operated this program since 2013. We've run over 70 programs in 6 different Midwestern states, and this has resulted in 25 megawatts of solar being installed through our program. Additionally, we host educational presentations as part of our programming, and through these educational presentations, over 14,000 people have been educated on how solar works and in the incentives that solar can bring to your home. So, I want to talk about why we're here. So this is a bit of a rundown on why you might be considering solar. So the first, and one that we see most people get excited about, is saving money on your energy bills. So solar can help you reduce the energy cost for your home or for your business. Secondly, we like to say that the way you currently buy electricity, if you're connected to the utility, you're essentially renting your electricity. So you're not building equity in your home. And so if you go solar, this helps build equity in your home because you're essentially locking in the rate that you're going to pay for your electricity for many years to come. Finally, there is a environmental benefit. So solar has no moving parts. It requires no fossil fuels to run. So it reduces your carbon emissions and is better for the environment. So this is a quick rundown of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to start off with some very basic Solar 101. How does it work? We're going to talk about net metering. Then we'll talk about options and considerations. So if you're thinking about going solar yourself, this is what you need to know, what you need to look out for. And then I'll talk about the incentives that are still available and what a sample system can cost. We'll go through kind of a case study to see how much a system could cost on a regular home. All right, so let's start with some Solar 101. So the first thing I like to talk about is a question that we get a lot. It's also a comment that we get on Facebook a lot, and it's, we're so far north, solar doesn't work here. we don't get enough sunshine. It's not effective. It's not a good choice to go solar in Wisconsin. So I like to pull out this solar irradiance map. So the red areas get more sun, blue and purple get less, and you can see we're in the green here. So not as much sun as the Southwest, but we're right in the middle. You may note that I also have an inset of Germany here, and I just have this in here to show that Germany has the highest amount of solar installed per capita in the world and is actually aiming to have 80% of their power come from solar by 2030, so just in 5 years. And you can see they get the equivalent amount of sunshine as Alaska. So this is just a little graphic that I like to show that shows that we can do it here. Solar is certainly worth it. I also like to point out that even though the Southwest gets more sunshine, our solar panels are actually more efficient than those that are installed in the Southwest because solar panels like it to be cool. The ideal day for a solar panel would be 60 degrees and perfectly sunny. When it's 100 plus degrees down in the Southwest, the solar panels are actually a little bit less effective. So I like to lead off with saying that yes, Wisconsin can host solar. All right, now before I dive into the rest of this presentation, I have a little uh, differentiation between what a kilowatt is and what a kilowatt hour is, because I'll be using these terms throughout the presentation. So a kilowatt hour is a unit of energy that's produced. This is what shows up on your energy bill. This is what you'll be paying for. For example, you might use 900 kilowatt hours over the month, and that's what shows up on your electric bill. On the other hand, a kilowatt is a measurement of capacity. So this is used to describe the size of an array. So for example, a standard home might have a 7 kW array, 7 kilowatt array. So this is the amount that your panels can produce at once. So if it's optimally producing, it's a perfect day, there's no shade. If you have a 7 kilowatt system, it'll produce 7 kWh at a time. So just remember that as I go through the presentation, those are different. All right, so this is a very, very elementary graphic on how solar works, but some people don't know. So the first step is the photons that come from the sun hit your panels, and it knocks loose electrons in the silicon that's in your solar panel, and this creates a current within the panel. However, this current is DC current, so your home cannot use it, so we have to have an inverter. The inverter is what we call the heart of the array, and I'll talk a little bit about the different types of inverters later on, but you need an inverter, so this inverter will convert the DC current into AC power, and your home is able to use that power. So the power from the solar panels goes into your home, it powers your appliances, charges your phone, turns on your light, and then if you have excess electricity, this will go through your electric meter and bank onto the grid, assuming you're grid tied. So this will then credit you via net metering, which I'll also dive into later. But this is just a basic rundown of how a very standard solar array works. All right, so I mentioned that inverters are the heart of the solar array. And like I said, it converts the DC electricity to AC. There are three main types of inverters that all vary in cost, and if you're considering going solar, an installer would likely help you pick out the right one for you. So the first of these options is a string inverter. So a string inverter is kind of what it sounds like. It'll string all your panels together into one inverter. This is the cheapest option. We don't see it too much anymore, but if you have a very ideal site with no shade, this can be a good option. The reason for this is that if you have a string inverter, if one of your panels, even just a corner of it, is getting a little bit of shade on it, it'll affect the production of all of your panels. So all of them will step down to what the panel that's producing the least is. So we don't often see a string inverter, but that is an option. It's the cheapest one. The one we see most is power optimizers. So these will be on each of your panels, and they'll just mount on the back. They're very small. And this inverter will then, they can operate independently. So it's a little added cost, but not very much, typically 1 to 2 cents per watt, which would work out to like $70 or so. So nothing crazy to add the power optimizers or the microinverters on. The inverter is also where your module level monitoring comes from, which if you're a data person like me, it's very exciting to look at the monitoring platforms. So with your inverter, you'll get an app or a website that you can log into, and then you can track how much solar or your solar panels are producing, or rather electricity. So you can check, you can see if your panels are producing correctly. You can see how much money you're saving throughout the day. You can check, how much does that cloud cover, knocking down my production. So the module level monitoring comes from your inverter rather than the panels. All right. A misconception that we like to kind of dispel in these presentations is that people often connect the idea of going solar to being off-grid. And for most people, this will not be the case. So grid tied is typically what we see in our programs. I would say vast, vast majority of folks that go through the Grow Solar program are grid tied. Batteries are very expensive. They can often double the price of your system. So a grid-tied design means that your solar panels are tied into the grid and that excess electricity is being banked onto the grid past your regular usage. Uh, this allows for net metering. There is a con to this, and so, if you get solar, if you're grid tied and you don't have a generator or a battery backup, when the power goes out, you'll still be out of power. And this is just for the simple reason that if there's a down line or there's workers working on the utility lines, you don't want to be sending power from your panels into those lines. So your panels will shut down in the event of a power outage. However, we do have some people go with the battery. This is useful. Oftentimes, folks with cabins go for batteries. They can be quite expensive, but it is an option for some people. All right, net metering. This is one of my favorite sections. And if you have questions about net metering, please drop them in the chat or raise a hand, unmute, uh, jump in, because this is a topic that a lot of people have questions about. So net metering is essentially the billing mechanism that allows you to earn credit for excess solar energy that you're producing and that you're sending it to the grid. The net metering policy will depend on your utility. So for most of Wisconsin, you'll see a retail rate. You'll get a retail rate back within your energy usage. So, if you use 800 kilowatt hours throughout the month and your system produces 800 kilowatt hours, your bill would be zero. If you're overproducing, then you're getting the wholesale rate. So this is often like 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So a lot of folks don't oversize their system. In fact, they'll tend to undersize their system because of this policy. You don't want to be selling that electricity back at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. It doesn't make financial sense when you're looking at the payback period of your panels. However, there are some local municipal utilities that will pay the retail rate even past your usage. Um, there's a few in the suburbs of Milwaukee, for example, that have this policy. So that's a very favorable policy for solar owners. But for most of Wisconsin, WPS, Alliant, you're getting that wholesale rate if you're overproducing. So this next slide is one of my favorite slides, and this is a sample bill. I believe this is from the Madison area, and this is for a winter month. I believe it's for February or January. So on the top, we have the electric usage. So this home used 208 kilowatt hours in the month. On the bottom, you see the cogeneration credit. So you can see their solar production for this month was 184 kilowatt hours. So they're underproducing. They're not quite making as much power as they used. So in the middle, they're being charged for the difference, which is 24 kilowatt hours. So you can see what they're paying for electricity is actually only around $4. So I see some questions in the chat, and yes, there is still a meter charge. So that's something we like to point out, that going solar will not eliminate the fixed charges that your utility charges you. because they still need to upkeep the grid. You're still paying to be on the grid. You're using their infrastructure. So the utility will still charge you. In this example, you see the customer charge about $13 here. So unless you're way overproducing, and like I said, you'd have to overproduce a lot because you're getting that wholesale rate, you'll still see those customer service charges. So your electric bill typically won't be zero, but it'll be significantly lowered. Another question. I am not familiar with the value of solar study. I might have to look into that. If you have a link or something, I'd love to take a look at that. So that's essentially net metering. So I believe this is a WPS bill, but I'm not certain. I know it's from the Madison area. But so you'll be paying for your net usage is essentially what I'm trying to get at. If you overproduce, you might see a small credit that can eat into that customer charge a little bit, but oftentimes we don't see people overproducing. Okay, options and considerations. So this is if you're considering putting solar on your home. I see a hand up. Tara, do you have your hand up?
I do, Corey. Thanks. Just going back to net metering for one
Yeah.
second, we've had some folks asking about the difference between net metering on a monthly basis versus an annual basis. Do you have any experience with how common each of those is?
Yeah, I would say most Wisconsin utilities are on a monthly basis. If it's a yearly basis, that's uh, I don't know if I've ever seen that. You want it to be, it's more beneficial for the customer to have it be a smaller length of time because like there are some utilities that do it by day, which is a really good, like we see that in Iowa, but in Wisconsin, I see monthly for the most part. There may be some municipal utilities out there or some co-ops that do the annual, but I often see the monthly credit.
Would you be able to speak to why that is beneficial to do on a shorter timeline?
Sure. So on a shorter timeline, like you're often will overproduce, uh, like on a day. John, uh, John, I'd like to, if you have, sure, go ahead.
So on a monthly basis, it's actually much less beneficial for customers because you true up at the end of each month and you're not able to accumulate kilowatt hour credits that you've banked. So on an annual basis, for example, I bank most of my credits in June, July, August, and I have quite a bit of reserve such that in October, November, December, January, I can pull those credits at
Mhm.
retail rate. But when so if on an annual basis, you're able to use your banked credits during the course of the year. Monthly, you can only use your credits, within the month. And so you in the October, November, December timeframe, when you're producing a lot less, your bills will go up.
That's true. I do see in some utilities, can I ask what utility you're in?
So we are I live in Osseo. We have Riverland Electric, and they just changed from annual to monthly.
Hmm.
And that's the reason why I know this so well, because we
Sure.
looked at the numbers pretty carefully. And we had lots of discussions with them. Xcel Energy is another utility that still has annual true up. But you're
Oh,
right. Most utilities are going to monthly because it
right.
favors them.
I will say, I believe there's some utilities that let you roll over those credits. For example, we're running a program in Iowa right now, and I'm seeing that like people can roll over those credits, which is very helpful, and that way you can bank those credits for later use, even in the case of monthly or daily net metering. Jesse, our meter's grandfathered in. Can you expand on that? You maybe want to hop off mute.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. This is great. I was working in Illinois for a long time in the ComEd residential market.
Yep.
and I also worked in California. So I agree that in California, the way PG&E does it is there's an annual true up and you pay the whole bill. And that's nuts. People get like $2,000 bills. Nobody wants that, right?
Right.
But in Illinois, I also agree with John. We have like highly seasonal production. So in ComEd, the way it works is you have an annual net metering zero out, but you get to roll the credits forward for 12 months. But you pay the electricity bill to ComEd for whatever you used on the monthly. And like, to me, that would be the preferred. But so back to my question was, so if you've already signed up for solar and then they changed the net metering policy and that utility in Wisconsin, do they grandfather in the meters that already had that agreement? Or that like would be terrible for those customers that did the math and sized their system based on annual net metering. And then those changes would really affect the financials for them. So that's my question.
I can answer that if it's okay, Corey.
Yeah,
From what
certainly.
my experience was when Riverland switched from annual to monthly, they were only able to do that because they had upgraded their grid, everybody's meters with smart meters. And so they were able to do that on the back on their end because of because they had upgraded their meters to smart meters. So there was no charge to customers in our case.
But there's that huge economic charge of now you don't have monthly rollover. So I guess my question is, if someone already had permission to operate in a residential solar system in Wisconsin, do they have a 20-year net metering agreement with the utility that can't be changed, or can that be revoked and changed, Corey, or whomever?
I mean, I believe the utility would have to propose it. I can speak to this in Illinois because they just had a change. Folks that got in and permission to operate before the change happened, they're set. They're grandfathered in. That can't be changed for them. I don't have any experience in Wisconsin, but I believe that it could be changed. But folks that they signed they got their permission to operate. I guess I'll have to admit I'm not familiar with any cases that it changed on the customer. I know that they can change like the billing cycle, but as far as like, if you're getting, the rate you're getting, or if you're getting the retail rate versus wholesale, I don't know if they can change that.
Well, that's good. I mean, so then that's really just the argument for why people should go solar sooner than later, because it just becomes more restrictive, right?
Right. And we have seen some states kind of take aim at net metering. Some states don't offer it at all. Like Indiana, for example, is considering eliminating net metering. So
What does that
Yes.
mean that they would be eliminating net metering? What would the implication of that be?
So you would be on the hook you'd be getting the wholesale rate essentially. You won't be getting credits. Like you'll have to have battery backups. Essentially, that'd be the only way that solar would make sense. But that's not that's not at risk in Wisconsin. We have seen, a lot of support for solar. I would say of all the Midwest states that we work in, Wisconsin is kind of the middle ground. Uh, Illinois has some great incentives. Iowa, not so much. We're somewhere in the middle, I would say. We have the focus on energy rebate, but not much more than that. But we're not openly hostile or anything like that. Any more questions on net metering? This is a great discussion. Otherwise, I can jump to options and considerations, and how you might want to site your solar, and answer some questions that people often have about rooftop solar. So some of this, like I said, is pretty elementary, but you're going to want your solar to be south facing. So ideally, you're going to want 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. sun exposure. That's when the sun is at its highest. So you want that sun exposure. That's called the solar window. So you want that. East and west is also a workable option, but it's not ideal. I do know some folks that have put solar on an east or west facing roof. Oftentimes you have to pay to add modules to make up the difference for the lack of production. And you're going to want to avoid shading. Trees are an obvious one, but even a utility pole, the corner of a building, that can affect your production. So I wanted to talk a little bit about roof mounts. This is the most common way to install solar. So oftentimes, panels on your roof are mounted flush using the existing pitch, which means that they don't have to pitch them up or down. They don't have to be angled off your roof. They'll just lie flat on there. Your installer can angle them to get the ideal angle, but oftentimes the existing roof pitch is fine. There are some considerations to think about. So these can include roof condition. So if your roof is within, we say, 8 years of needing to be replaced, we recommend that you go ahead and get that roof replaced before you put solar on your roof, because if you need to get your roof replaced, you're going to need to pay the installer to come out, take the panels off, put them back on. You don't want to do that, and panels can last a long time. Most panels are warranted for 25 years, and that warranty is often just guaranteeing that they'll be within 90% of their production at the 25-year mark. So they'll still be producing well past that 25 years. So they're a very, very long-term investment. So you're going to want your roof to be in good condition. Roof material can also influence the cost. So asphalt shingle roof, standard metal roofs, those are standard. If you have something like slate or Spanish clay tile, that can increase the cost of solar. Cleaning. So people ask, do I have to clean my panels? The answer is not really. If you're a really diligent solar owner, you can spray them down if you can get to them safely. We don't want you climbing on the roof and risking your health to clean your panels. Rain will wash them off for you. But you can spray them down if you want. Snow. So another question is, do I need to clean the snow off? Some homeowners will get a rubber roof rake, which you can use to scrape the snow off your panels, but they do heat up a little bit. So if there's even just the next sunny day after it snows and there's a little bit of the panel showing, it'll often start to melt the snow off your panels. Something to note about this is that the snow will often then slide off in one big clump, so it'll collect on the roof space that's below your panels. So you want to be wary of that. Or if they're right up to the edge, it'll slide off in one big go. So you want to be careful of what's underneath your panels, because if you have a walkway, furniture, a doorway, you'll want to be careful of that. So another thing that we get asked about is hail. So the answer to this question is that hail will not really affect your panels. Obviously, there's some extreme cases where it can crack the glass, but tier 1 panels, which is what your installer should be offering if you're considering going solar, will be rated to withstand 1¼ inch hail at 50 miles an hour. And they do this by, they put it in a tunnel and they fire hail at it using like a gun type thing. They fire the hail at it and it can't crack it. I'd like to share a little anecdote that I had from a program that we ran in the Waukesha County area last year. We had a pretty big hailstorm come through, and we were a little worried. All these people had just gotten brand new solar systems, big hailstorm. So we asked our installer, did anyone report any damage? Is there anything we need to be concerned about? And the only work that they had from that hailstorm was going out to remove panels so that people could fix the roofs that got damaged. So a lot of times we see that the panels are often stronger than your roof in the case of hail. And that's been a common theme throughout all our programs, but that's just one little story that I had from last year, so very recent. And then finally, animal damage can be a concern. So if you have squirrels using your roof as a little squirrel highway from walnut tree to walnut tree, you'll still have that when your solar panels are up. So you can opt for what's called Critter Guard. That's a name brand. Animal enclosure is another word for it. And that's just a protecting that goes around the base of your panels so that squirrels can't get in there, chew up the wires, store stuff in there. A lot of people will opt for that as well. Andrew, I see you have a raised hand.
Yes, hi, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
A comment on roof mounting that I experienced with my system in Madison, which I installed in 2004. my house was a ranch style house with a relatively low roof pitch. So if I didn't brush off snow, my panels would be buried in snow in the season and remain that way because if there was no amount of the panel exposed to sunlight, they never warmed up and that snow would remain. If there was even the slightest bit of panel exposed, that heat would spread and the panel
Right.
would actually melt clear. So I was brushing mine off after every significant snowfall. I had a neighbor down the street with a Cape Cod style house, a steeper roof pitch. They didn't have to bother because it always slid off. And the second thought on roof mounting that I was a little dissatisfied about, when it did come time for me to re-roof my house 20 years after the installation of the panels, my installer wanted an exorbitant rate to remove the panels and reinstall them, something like $8,000, which would have completely blown the entire economics of the,
Right.
In 2004, I was basically, the economics of it was that I was buying 50 years of electricity all at once.
Yep.
And that would have blown it out of the water. So we ended up just DIYing the removal ourselves. So that in future, if I get another system, I'm going to ground mount it so that doesn't become an issue, both for cleaning them off and for dealing with the roof.
Yeah, that's a great experience. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's completely fair. If you have a low pitched roof, you might want to invest in that rubber roof rake. Is that what you used?
I was using a broom on a very long handle.
Yeah, if you can
A roof rake would have been better, but
Yeah.
I was too cheap to ever buy one.
Yeah, if you can safely access your panels, of course, it would be great for you to go ahead and go up there and brush the snow off. Sounds like
Yeah,
you were
I was
able to
doing
do
it
that,
because
so.
my house was a low ranch. I could
Yeah.
do it in the front yard, sketchily on the second to highest rung of a step ladder that I was moving around the front yard. So I'm sure that was a comical view to my neighbors when I arrived.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Something else about snow that I forgot to mention is that a reputable installer should account for some days of snow coverage when they're considering when they're giving you the proposal and they're showing you how much energy that your system is going to make. That should be built in. Obviously, it varies per installer, but yeah, that's a good point that if you have a low pitched roof, you may want to go ahead and brush those off because it won't just slide off by itself. And speaking of ground mounts, that is my next slide. So a ground mount is another option if you don't have roof space. You want to be able to easily access them to clean them. That's another pro of a ground mount. It'll require trenching. So, they'll need to run trench from your panels to your electricity box. It is anchored to a new structure, which can make it more expensive. They'll have to build that, put it in the ground. There is sometimes we run into zoning things with this. So if you're in town, that's something to note. You might need a permit. Oftentimes the installer should be able to do that for you, but that's just something to keep in mind that's another cost. Another pro to a ground mount is that they can optimally angle them to the sun, and oftentimes they're adjustable. So they can make them steeper in the winter as the sun gets lower in the sky, but they are typically more expensive. So ground mount is an option if you don't have roof space, if you have a lot of room in your yard, a ground mount can be a good option. So this is my little considerations checklist. That was a lot. So there's some things to think about if you're thinking about solar. So do you want a roof mount? You want to put it on your house, on your barn, garage, etc.? Or are you going to go for that ground mount? Do you have a good solar window? Remember, that's 9 to 3 with no shading or limited shading. Do you have those critter concerns? There's squirrels. You're going to want critter guard. The age and condition of your roof, so you don't have to pay for your installer to fix that. Another thing to think about is your energy usage. So I also have this in the wish list section. So if you're thinking about solar, you're going to want to consider your energy use and if you're going to add on in the future, because your installer can then right size the system. So for example, you're thinking about buying an electric car, your family's growing, maybe you're going to get a new hot tub or something like that. These are add-ons that you should talk to your installer about. Also, if you have equipment requests, this is another thing to think about. So you can request American-made panels. Most installers will carry American-made or North American-made panels, battery backup system so that you can be on when the grid is down. Most installers will offer EV installation, EV charger installation. So if you have a wish list when you're going solar, this is a good time to think about those things as well. This is just my little, so you don't always have to increase your energy usage. I won't spend too long on this slide, but you can also reduce your energy usage, which can make your system more affordable. So, if you're going to go ahead and upgrade some appliances, you're going to plan to reduce your energy usage. This is also something that you can talk to an installer about because, they can then reduce the size of your system, which can save you some money. All right, so incentives and financing. So we'll talk about some money now. So the federal solar tax credit, if you're plugged into the news, I'm sure you've heard about this. So as of now, it's still available. And this is a 30% tax credit on all qualified expenditures. So it includes the purchase of the components as well as the installation. It can even cover, for example, if you need to bolster your roof, it can cover that. You have to own the property. It doesn't have to be your principal residence, so it could be a cabin or something like that. And also battery storage is also eligible for this 30% tax credit. Now, there's a big caveat on this because the current bill that went through the House, it's in the Senate now, is planning on eliminating this. The current language, when it passed the House, was that it would end at the end of the year. So you'd have to be up and operating by the end of 2025 in order to get this tax credit. I believe the new Senate language, if I read it correctly, is that after the bill passes, it will be 180 days that it will still be available, and then it will step down. So it will vary. I know they were aiming for 4th of July week on that, so that would still be the end of the year. It could change. We're keeping an eye on it. So now's a great time to go solar because the tax credit is still available. If you don't have the tax appetite, also it does roll over. So it can be a pretty sizable tax credit. So it can roll over if you don't have the tax appetite for it in the first year. So if you have any questions about the current state of it, you can pop those in the chat. But like I said, we're keeping an eye on it. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. SEIA, the solar industry lobbyist group, is there in Washington lobbying to save the tax credit. But if the bill passes as written right now, it would go away with likely at the end of the year. There are some state incentives available. So from Focus on Energy, there's a $300 residential rebate. If you live in a rural zip code, which you can check their website to see which zip codes they consider rural, then it's $600, so it's doubled. If you're non-residential, so if it's a commercial property, this changes, so it's $50 per kW. There's also direct pay available. So I'm not sure how many people in here are representing a nonprofit or their church or something like that, but this now allows tax-exempt entities to get a check in the amount that their 30% tax credit would have been. Aaron, how do you think the elimination of the federal tax credit would impact solar adoption? That is a great question. Obviously, people were going solar before the tax credit was there. So the tax credit, the 30%, came from the IRA that was passed through the Biden administration. Before that, it was hovering around 25%. There are some theories that this would force installers to lower their price because we pay much higher prices here than in places like Europe, for example. We work with a European company that does group buys. We compare notes with them. So there is a theory that installers can raise the price slightly and then make that up. The customer is not paying that. The government is paying that for them. So it'll be complicated. We're hoping that it stays around because it is a great incentive for homeowners to go solar. Essentially, I'm hoping that this pressure on the tax credit encourages solar adoption this year, and that then in the future, there'll still be available incentives through Focus on Energy, through our group buys, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So, I mean, the return on investment will still be there without the tax credit, but it might be a little longer. Harry, what happened to the Solar for All program? That is a great question. So the Solar for All program is based on federal funding. So I believe that got pulled. There are some states that have their own. So Illinois, for example, has their own Solar for All program that's using state funds. I don't believe Wisconsin will be getting our Solar for All program anytime soon. There is a tribal Solar for All program. So if you live in tribal lands, through MREA, which is another organization, they were able to secure and get that funding dispersed before it got pulled by the federal government. So they'll get their funding. But as far as ours, I don't believe we'll be getting that. Tara, yes. So, yep, a farm would be able to get the 30% tax credit. It's the same for commercial. That is also tied to that tax credit that would be going away at the end of the year. So if you have a commercial property, it'd be the same story as far as residential. I also have this slide on property value. So essentially your panels will increase the value of your home. Nothing crazy. They won't be worth double what you paid for them, but they will often increase the value of your home by how much your system is worth. So it doesn't decrease it. It's the same as putting an add-on or doing other improvements to your home. It does increase the value of your home. Homes with solar also often sell faster. So if you have a solar on your home and you're ready to move, your home will likely sell faster. This is a study done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Found that homes with solar sell faster. Another thing to note is your property taxes cannot go up as a result of putting solar on your home. This is a state law. Nothing about your solar is taxable. There's no sales tax, and your property taxes cannot increase. Something else to consider is your insurance, your homeowner's insurance. The value of your home is going up, so you may need to adjust how much your home insurance is covering. This can be somewhat negligible, a couple dollars increase on your insurance bill. And most major carriers have no issue with covering solar. So that's something you'll want to talk to your insurance agent about, but just something to keep in mind when you're putting solar on your property. All right, so now I'm going to talk about group buys, which is what Grow Solar does. So as a Grow Solar employee, I negotiate, we put out an RFP and we try to get the best price that we can. So that's the base price. So we'll get bids from these installers, but also we have group buy discounts. So as people sign up through our programs, there'll be price breaks built in. So, and this comes in the form of a per watt price break. Typically, sometimes we see installers apply with a percentage price break, but most of the time we see a per watt breakdown. And so this example is from our Central Wisconsin program. So if we have about 150 kW go through, you'll see that, for example, that's the second tier, or plus 100 over 150, you'll get 10 cents a watt off. So that's $100 per kW. So if you're getting that 7 kilowatt system, you're going to get a $700 price break through the group buy. We do this, when we select an installer, we're running a program. It's our job to go out and get as many people as we can that are ready to go solar. So that way the installer, they know they'll be working in a certain area. They know they'll be sending trucks there, employees. They don't have to be bouncing around all over the place. They can also anticipate the demand that we're going to create and then buy in bulk. So essentially we're getting bulk savings through the group buy. Like I said, it unlocks the power of bulk purchasing. So as more and more people join, that price drops usually up to, we have the final benchmark at 350 kW. And then, so this stacks on top of the incentives that are available. And I have a little example of what this can look like in this coming slide. So I'll go through a little breakdown, a little net or case study. I did want to talk about adders a little bit. So this is what this slide is about. Adders is a solar term, but it doesn't mean it's a fancy extra or anything like that. So these are things that can influence the cost of your system. So in this first picture on the left, these people have a split array. That can be an adder. It can add a few cents per watt. If you have a really steep roof or it's 3 stories plus, that can be an adder. You need that critter guard. All these types of things can increase the cost of your system, but it's often needed to make sure that the installer can get it safely installed and it's operating correctly. So this is a case study that I'm going to go through that kind of breaks down the cost of everything. This is a 7.2 kW array, and we just use this because that's a size we often see. So like I said, this is using the Central Wisconsin pricing. It varies throughout our programs. But so I had the base price at $325 a watt, which is the price that we negotiated with the installer. And then I put in some adders. So these aren't, for example, this is not like I added the multiple roof arrays. This house does not have multiple roof arrays, but I just wanted to put that in there because that might be something that you have. This person, for example, wanted an EV charger and the snow guard, so it protects their gutters and things on their roof from the snow sliding off the panels. So that brought their final quoted price to about $26,500. Then you get that 30% tax credit, which is close to $8,000, which is a very great incentive. The focus on energy rebate, $300. And then this is assuming that the group buy hits that top benchmark. This home would get a $1,000 check at the end of the program from the installer as a rebate. So that brings their net cost down to $17,000. On the right side, we have a payback period breakdown, and this is a conservative breakdown. It's using a 18-cent per kilowatt hour electricity price, but it does not assume there's any electricity rate increases, which we all know typically your utility isn't requesting a price reduction. Oftentimes it's a price increase. So assuming that it's 18 cents per kilowatt hour in perpetuity, the payback period on this system would be about 10 years. So in 10 years, this system has paid for itself through the electric bill savings that it's generating. And then over 25 years, you're actually $26,000 to the good because you're saving on your electric bill and it's already paid for itself. Okay, so our programs that we are running right now include all of these counties in the state. So we have our Central Wisconsin program, which is Portage, Wapaka, Marathon, Marinette, Wood, and Waushara, if I didn't say Waushara already. We're also running a Green Bay, Fox Valley program. So that's Brown, Winnebago, Outagamie counties. Are running a Door County program, La Crosse County, and then Milwaukee, Waukesha. On top of this, we're also doing a program in Iowa and 2 in Illinois. John, do we have group buy for batteries? We do not, unfortunately. It's typically for the panels. Sometimes we see folks get batteries through our group buy when they're getting their panels for the first time, but the group buy savings don't apply to the batteries. So these are the programs that we're running. If you're interested, you can let me know. They each have their own installer and RFP that we went through. So I can let you know more details about each program if you guys are interested. And then this is the contact information. So this is my phone number on the bottom. And this is the general info account, but that's also me. So I'm the one that runs the info account as well. So if you'd like to talk more or have any other questions, you can reach out that way. Quick plug before we open it up for more questions. The MREA is a member-based organization. So if you want to support programs like these, you can become a member at midwestrenew.org/membership. All right, I believe that's all I have for the presentation, but I'd like to take any questions if there's questions. Andrew.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to revisit your discussion on net metering, that in most locations or most utilities in the state that you get the wholesale rate. When I was in Madison, I was net metering and time of use metering, and I was getting a retail rate, and the disparity between peak rate and off-peak rate was really quite large, so it was very beneficial.
Mhm.
I moved to Wausau. I have found here that it seems that the net metering rate is wholesale, and the time of use rate barely differs between peak and off peak. So it seems to me that changes the economics substantially. So two questions: has that changed over time? Like were more of the utilities in the state using retail, and they changed that to wholesale at some point in time? And the second question is, like, what do you think is the best approach? Does one just want to right size a system to optimize the return, or go batteries and not be connected to the utility at all and not be eating the monthly customer service charge?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, we recommend that folks will right size your system, like often aim for 90% of your electric usage. So then on a good day, you'll be producing all of your electricity, and you might be selling a little bit at wholesale. But for the most part, you'll always be getting that retail rate then if you're under a little bit. So that's what we see most people end up doing. Can you repeat your first question as well?
Whether the net metering scene has changed in the state. Like, was there a time when more utilities were providing a retail rate, or has it always varied by utility? And I just got lucky with MG&E and Madison that they were so generous.
Yeah, I would say a lot of utilities. I mean, I've only been doing this for 3 years, but most utilities have always been doing, I believe, have been doing the wholesale rate past your own electric use. Like I said, there's some good utilities, or good for the solar owner, that have that retail rate, even if you're overproducing.
Thank you.
And let's be clear about that. I think it is kind of confusing, because again, during you produce excess energy during the day. At night, when you bank those excess credits, you're able to draw those back at retail rate and use them.
Right.
But at the end of the month or at the end of the year, any excess credits that you have in your bank, that's what is reimbursed at the avoided cost or wholesale rate.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, John. Do you have to live in the counties you highlighted to qualify? So that is for our group buys. So if you're in one of those counties, you're automatically able to sign up for our programs. If you're just outside one of those areas, I would still sign up for the one that's closest to you. Our installers, they're not obligated to, or you can talk to me. They're not obligated to give you the group buy pricing, because we did sign a contract with them. There's a process that we go through that they have to offer this rate to anyone that signs up that lives in the program area. But oftentimes we do see, installers still give that price to people that are outside of those counties if they're relatively close. Sorry, I'm going back to the slide with the counties. This was way in the end of the presentation. So I would still recommend that if you're close to reach out. So
Okay. Yeah, we are just north of the Brown County one. We're in Oconto County.
I believe they would probably give you the group buy rate.
Perfect.
Perhaps
Thank you.
if you want to email me, I can ask them.
Yep,
if
I
you'd
will
like.
definitely do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Mhm. Tara.
Corey, would you take a second to speak to how you talked about Wisconsin maybe in the middle of the road on policy?
Mhm.
I think MREA has a really good understanding of policy. So are there any major takeaways that you would like people who are concerned or would like to see more distributed energy generation? What the big things to be aware of about our policy in the Midwest versus Wisconsin specifically? Just overall takeaways from that.
Sure. So I mean, I would love for us to have an SREC program like Illinois does. So the state of Illinois has a goal to be producing. Now I can't think of the number. I can't remember the number. Like a certain amount, maybe 100% of their power using green energy. And so the SREC program is essentially the state will pay you for adding green power to the grid so that they can keep their fossil fuel plants online. So they're buying the credits from you. That's the renewable energy credit is what the SREC stands for. So if Wisconsin were to pass a policy like that, and they were aiming to produce more of our energy mix using green or renewables, that'd be a great benefit for solar owners in Wisconsin, and to promote the adoption of solar across the state. And then that could also make up for the loss of the solar tax credit that will likely be coming federally. In Illinois, that the SREC payment is often equivalent to the 30% federal tax credit. So we're seeing systems in Illinois that are, sub $10,000 for a standard home. So it's very affordable there. As far as I would say we do have the focus on energy rebate, which is more than some states are doing. So I am glad that we have that. But I would say for the most part, that's the kind of policy that we'd like to see would be Wisconsin, pushing to have more renewables, and then incentivizing folks by paying them for that production. So yeah, it's a very interesting, the Illinois, the SREC market. So the state is essentially buying 25 years worth of your green energy production. You can opt to do that through your installer. There's also an SREC marketplace. So if you don't want to do that, you can hold on to them and then put them on the marketplace, and then other places can buy them. It's very interesting. It's kind of like when people buy carbon offsets. So that's a good policy.
Well, thank you so much, Corey, for this presentation. Thank you also everyone else for joining us, for your perspective and for this conversation. We will be providing a copy of the slides from today's webinar, as well as a recording to everybody who registered. And you can thank you, Corey, for providing your contact information. If you missed his email or phone number, you can grab a screenshot of it now. Otherwise, you can also get a hold of me and we will get you in touch. But we are right at 1:01. So again, thanks everybody for being here, and we will sign off.